In 30 years of gardening, I've probably wasted $300 in a single season planting perennials at exactly the wrong time. Not neglect, bad timing. August is where I made most of those mistakes because almost nobody plants in it. Here's why that matters. Spring doesn't build your garden. Spring just shows you whether you did the work now. While the plant looks like it's doing nothing and the roots are actually working overtime underground. Miss this window and you're not bad at gardening, you're on the wrong clock, and you'll be buying the same plant twice come April. 9 perennials, 1 short window. Stay for number 4, the mistake that cost me years before I figured it out. And by the time we get to number 9, you'll wonder why nobody told you about it sooner. It's the one plant on this list your neighbors won't have. Most of these work zone 4 through 8 shift the timing a couple of weeks either way outside that. I've made every one of these mistakes myself. Here's the first. Number 1 coneflower, Echinacea. If you've ever bought a coneflower in spring. Planted it and watched it sulk for 2 months before it finally decided to grow. That wasn't a bad plant, that was bad timing. Coneflower grows an aggressive taproot, and transplanting it in spring while it's already pushing new growth shocks that root system at the exact moment it's working hardest. Move it or plant it now instead while it's easing toward dormancy, and it settles in without a fight. Full sun, soil that drains well it hates, sitting in water, and space new plants 18 to 20, 4 inches apart. Water it in deeply once, then leave it alone. Overwatering a fresh coneflower does more damage than underwatering it. Leave the seed heads standing through winter instead of cutting them back in fall. If you want goldfinches at your feeder in February, that's not a bonus. That's basically a second reason to grow it. And once it's established, next August is when you'll want to divide it if the center starts looking woody and bare. It also happens to be one of the more drought-tolerant plants on this list once its roots are in. And it pairs naturally with ornamental grasses or black-eyed Susans if you want a bed that basically ignores you all summer. Number 2, Peony. This is the mistake that costs people years, not seasons. Peonies grow from buds called eyes, and one measurement decides whether you get flowers or just leaves for the rest of your life. Those eyes need to sit 1 to 2 inches below the soil. Go any deeper, and the plant will grow, leaf out, look perfectly healthy, and never bloom. I've seen peonies planted 3 inches too deep sit there, doing nothing but growing leaves for 6 straight years. Give them full sun, at least 6 hours, rich soil that drains well, and skip heavy nitrogen fertilizer it grows, leaves at the expense of flowers. If you want serious blooms, look for Sarah Bernhardt or Festiva maxima. Both are old varieties, and both are old for a reason. One more thing worth knowing, peonies resent being disturbed once they're happy, so plant it where it can stay for the next 20 years. And don't panic if you see ants crawling on the unopened buds they're after the sugary coating. Not hurting the plant. And they're gone by the time the flower opens. If you're growing one of the heavier double-flowered varieties, loop a simple grow through stake around the plant early in spring before it fills in trying to prop up a flopped-over peony in full bloom never ends well. Quick gut check before we keep moving. If you've got a peony that's never once bloomed, pause the video, go dig gently near the base, and check that depth. I'll wait. Okay. If it's buried too deep, the fix isn't complicated. Dig it up in fall while it's dormant, raise it, and replant at the right depth. It'll skip blooming for a year while it resets, then come back on schedule. Moving on. Number 3, Astilbe. This is the plant people kill by being nice to it. Astilbe wants shade, partial to full, and soil that never fully dries out, not even once, while it's setting next year's flower buds. Let it dry out a single time at the wrong moment, and those feathery plumes simply won't show up in spring. No warning, no do-over. Space plants, 12 to 18 inches apart, keep the soil consistently damp. Mulch it heavily going into fall to hold moisture and buffer the roots from an early hard freeze, and divide the clump every 3 or 4 years once the center starts looking tired and thin. Pair it with hostas and ferns and you've basically built a shade bed that takes care of itself. It's also one of the better perennials for a slightly damp. Low-lying corner of the yard that other plants tend to rot in Astilbe actually prefers that spot. Number 4, bearded iris. This is the one I promised you at the top, and it's the plant I got wrong for years. Every instinct you have as a gardener tells you to bury a plant. With bearded iris, that instinct will kill it. Iris grows from a rhizome, a fat, horizontal stem that grows along the surface, and it needs to sit right at ground level. Part of it peeking out of the dirt, not buried like a bulb. Bury it, and trapped moisture rots it before it ever gets the chance to bloom. The right way to plant it: build a small ridge of soil, set the rhizome so it's resting on that ridge rather than tucked underneath it, and fan the roots out on both sides, angling them downward into the soil. Full sun, sharp drainage, and keep mulch away from the rhizome entirely. August, right after it finishes blooming and eases into dormancy, is exactly when you divide and replant it, and while you're at it, cut away the old woody center of the clump and only replant the firm, younger rhizomes from the outer edge. That's also your window to check for iris borer damage, which shows up as soft, mushy tunneling. Toss any rhizome that's hollowed out rather than replanting it. Get this right, and you get tall, ruffled blooms by late spring. Get it wrong, and you get rot. Modern bearded iris varieties come in nearly every color except true red, and a lot of the newer ones are genuinely fragrant up close, which is something catalog photos never tell you. If a mistake like that one is new to you, this channel exists to catch the ones nobody warned you about. Hit subscribe and keep going, because we're only a third of the way through this list. Number 5, Daylily, Hemerocallis. Daylilies are nearly impossible to kill outright, which is exactly why this mistake sneaks up on people. Left alone for years, a clump gets overcrowded underground, and bloom count quietly drops a little more every summer so gradually that people blame the weather, the soil, anything but the real cause. The fix is dividing it. Every 3 to 5 years, dig up the clump, split it into sections, and replant with room to breathe, about 18 to 24 inches apart. Full sun to light shade, and don't overthink the soil dailies aren't picky about much. Each flower only lasts a single day, but a well-divided, well-fed clump throws dozens of buds across a season. If you want blooms from early summer all the way into fall instead of one big 3-week show, mix early, mid, and late season varieties in the same bed. Most tags will tell you which is which. Snapping off the spent blooms each morning keeps the plant looking tidy and puts its energy into the next round of buds instead of seed production. That's the difference 3 years of neglect and one afternoon with a shovel makes. Number 6, Bleeding Heart. If yours vanished sometime in July and you assumed it died, relax, it didn't. By August, a bleeding heart has already shut down its top growth on purpose and pushed everything underground into its roots. From the surface, it looks finished. Underground, it's exactly where it needs to be. Those roots need a real winter chill. Something like 16 to 20 weeks below freezing to trigger that flush of heart-shaped flowers next spring. Set the crown level with the soil, give it rich, moist soil in partial to full shade, and plant ferns or hostas nearby so the gap it leaves in summer doesn't look like a mistake. If you're buying one now, nurseries often sell them as bare root crowns this time of year rather than potted plants that's normal, not a sign of a dead plant, and it's actually the better way to buy it. Once it's in the ground, avoid moving it again. The roots are brittle and don't forgive being dug up twice. One safety note if you've got a curious dog: the foliage and roots are mildly toxic if eaten in quantity, so it's worth knowing where you've planted it if pets have run of the yard. I actually dug up and threw away a completely healthy bleeding heart once because I was sure I'd lost it in July, of all months, and replaced it with impatiens. That mistake is the whole reason I'm telling you this one, so you don't have to make it too. Number 7, Russian Sage. This is the plant people kill with kindness. Rich soil, regular watering, wanting to help it along do that, and instead of standing as a structural silvery backbone through fall, it gets leggy, flops over, and looks like it's collapsing under its own weight. Russian sage actually wants lean, well-drained soil and to mostly be left alone. Full sun, space it 2 to 3 feet apart since a mature plant reaches 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, and cut it back hard, down to a few inches, in late winter before new growth starts. Once it's established, resist the urge to water it during dry spells. It's genuinely drought tolerant, and extra water just brings back the floppy growth you were trying to avoid. It's also one of the only structural perennials deer and rabbits leave completely alone, and it pairs beautifully with ornamental grasses if you're going for that loose prairie look, which, if you garden near a woodline, is worth more than the flowers themselves. Bees take to it hard once it blooms, so if you've been trying to bring more pollinators into the yard without babying a bunch of fussy flowers, this is the low-effort way to do it. And because the foliage itself is aromatic, deer tend to walk right past it even when they're hitting everything else nearby, planted as a border, and it doubles as a quiet fence line. Number 8, creeping phlox. Most people buy one small pot, tuck it into a corner, and wonder 2 years later why it hasn't turned into the carpet of blooms they saw in a photo somewhere. Creeping phlox spreads by rooting as it grows along the ground, so one lonely plant simply doesn't have enough runners to knit together anything. Plant several, spaced 12 to 18 inches apart in a staggered pattern rather than a straight row, and by next spring they'll have grown into each other. It wants full sun and soil on the drier, rockier side rich. Wet soil is where it actually struggles most, especially in humid summers when it can develop powdery mildew if it's crowded and damp. Shear it back lightly right after it finishes blooming in spring, and you'll get a tidier mat and sometimes a light rebloom later in the season. Get this right, and by April, you'll have a solid mat of pink, purple, white, or blue, while your neighbors still have bare mulch. It also happens to be one of the best plants for holding soil on a slope, since the roots knit together and stop erosion in a spot where grass usually struggles anyway. It's evergreen too, so even in the dead of winter, you'll have green foliage covering that slope instead of bare dirt or mulch washing downhill. Before we get to the last one, a quick honesty check. I'm not telling you to run out and buy all 9 of these today. Pick the 2 or 3 that solve a problem you actually have in your yard right now: a bare slope, a shady corner, a spot the deer keep hitting, and start there. The plant that fixes your actual problem beats the plant that just looked good on a list. Number 9, Japanese Anemone. The plant I promised you at the start, the one almost nobody plants in August because almost nobody's heard of doing it. Most gardeners think of it, if they think of it at all, as a spring plant. It's actually one of the best late season performers you can put in the ground. And planting it now while it's still warm enough for roots to establish but cool enough that top growth isn't fighting for water sets it up to spread quietly for years. Give it partial shade, full sun works in cooler climates, moist, well-drained soil, and patience. The first year, it may barely do anything visible above ground while the rhizomes spread below it. By year 2 or 3, you'll get 2 to 4 foot stems topped with simple white or pink flowers blooming right into fall when almost everything else in the garden is finished. One honest caution: once it's happy, it spreads by rhizome and can wander further than you planned, so give it a spot with room, or a bed edged by a walkway or lawn to naturally contain it. It also makes an excellent cut flower for the house. It is, without much competition, the most underestimated plant on this entire list. In a windy spot, the taller varieties can lean under the weight of their own blooms, so a simple ring stake set early in the season saves you from finding them flat on the ground after the first fall storm. If you've only got a small bed, look for one of the compact varieties bred to stay under 2 feet. You get the same late season payoff without it wandering into everything else. This is what all 9 of these look like a year later, planted the same week in the same beds, not because I know some secret. Because I stopped fighting the calendar and started planting on it instead. Every one of these plants was doing the same quiet, invisible work underground while I stood there in August thinking nothing was happening. 9 perennials, a narrow window to get them in, and no real excuse left to hit next spring and wonder why your garden still looks empty. None of these are exotic or hard to find. You can walk into almost any nursery this weekend and pick up all 9. The only thing standing between you and a full bed next spring is whether you actually put them in the ground this month instead of telling yourself you'll get to it. I put together a complete guide with the exact spacing, depth, and soil notes for every plant on this list links in the comments. And I want to know one thing. Which of these 9 are you planting this week? And what growing zone are you in? Drop a number in the comments. I read every one, and so does everyone else watching from your climate. If this saved you from a mistake you didn't know you were about to make, subscribe. I put a new one of these out every week.